Stellantis just threatened Trump, and Trump's reaction is setting the stage for a major showdown. As the automaker faces falling sales and shifting priorities, its decision to pivot overseas has raised serious questions about loyalty, economics, and survival. Trump's fiery response is adding fuel to the fire. But why did Stellantis take this risk? What are the consequences for American jobs and industries? And how will this affect you? Let's break it all down. What's happening? Stellantis didn't just make a decision, they ignited the firestorm that has reshaped the conversation around American industry. Few companies would dare to challenge a former president known for his fierce rhetoric, but Stellantis did just that. In an audacious move, Stellantis called out Trump's America First policies, labeling them outdated in a rapidly globalizing world. Their statement questioned whether prioritizing domestic production was sustainable in an industry driven by innovation and efficiency. The timing was deliberate. The announcement came on the heels of massive layoffs at their Warren truck assembly plant, where thousands of jobs were axed in a restructuring effort. While Trump's policies aimed to keep jobs on home soil, Stellantis argued they needed to think globally to stay competitive. The automaker's reasoning revolved around the economics of modern manufacturing. EV production, for example, requires sourcing rare materials and building at scale, factors that make global operations a necessity. To Stellantis, this wasn't about betrayal, but survival. Yet for workers and their communities, this decision felt deeply personal. Factories that once symbolized stability now stood as empty reminders of broken promises. For Trump, this moment provided the perfect opportunity to highlight the flaws in globalization and rally support for his protectionist agenda. The move set the stage for a corporate versus political clash with far-reaching implications. But what made Stellantis take such a risk? And how would Trump respond? Trump's response wasn't just expected, it was explosive, and it raised the stakes for what was quickly becoming a battle of ideologies. Trump fires back. When Stellantis struck, Trump countered with his signature intensity. This wasn't just a war of words, it was a declaration of economic principles. Trump's response was immediate and forceful. He accused Stellantis of abandoning American workers, branding their actions as corporate greed disguised as strategy. His solution: tariffs as high as 200% on companies outsourcing production. The former president's rhetoric wasn't just about Stellantis. It was a rallying cry for an America First agenda. At rallies and in media appearances, he painted a vivid picture of American workers betrayed by corporations chasing profits abroad. His narrative resonated in industrial towns hit hardest by layoffs and factory closures. Trump's approach was not without controversy. Critics argued that his tariffs could spark trade wars and drive up costs for consumers. But for his supporters, this was about principles. They viewed Trump as a defender of the forgotten worker, standing up against corporate exploitation. Stellantis, however, remained defiant. The company argued that their decisions were grounded in the harsh realities of a competitive market. For them, survival meant making tough choices they believed Trump's policies didn't fully address. This back and forth wasn't just about policy, it was about the soul of American industry. Trump and Stellantis were locked in a battle to define the future of manufacturing. As the feud escalated, the focus shifted to those most affected, the workers and their communities, who bore the brunt of these seismic shifts. The layoff fallout. For workers at Stellantis' factories, this wasn't just business. It was their lives turned upside down. Layoffs aren't numbers, they're personal stories of struggle. At the Warren truck assembly plant, thousands of employees faced sudden layoffs. For many, these jobs weren't just a paycheck, they were a way of life, a means to provide stability for their families. The ripple effects were immediate and devastating. Local businesses that depended on factory workers saw a sharp decline in customers. Diners, grocery stores, and even daycare centers struggled to stay afloat as incomes dried up. Schools faced declining enrollment, and neighborhoods that once thrived began to stagnate. The emotional toll was just as severe. Families grappled with uncertainty, parents worried about making mortgage payments, and children faced disruptions in their education. The layoffs weren't just an economic blow, they were a fracture in the social fabric of these communities. Trump seized this narrative, highlighting the personal stories of those affected to criticize Stellantis. At rallies, he told the story of an auto worker who had lost everything, using it as a symbol of what he called the failure of globalization. For Stellantis, the layoffs were framed as a necessary evil. With EV sales struggling to gain traction and production costs rising, the company argued they had no choice but to cut back. Their global strategy promised long-term survival, but left immediate devastation in its wake. The fallout wasn't just economic, it was emotional and social, creating a divide that both Trump and Stellantis sought to control. This divide set the stage for a deeper conversation. Should companies prioritize profit over community, and what happens when these priorities collide? The clash of ideals. This wasn't just about jobs or tariffs, it was a battle for the future of industry itself. Could profit and patriotism coexist? Stellantis' approach exposed a fundamental tension in modern capitalism. On one side stood the need for global efficiency and innovation, on the other, the responsibility to support local communities. For Trump, the solution was clear: protect American workers at all costs. His proposed tariffs weren't just economic measures, they were symbolic acts of defiance against globalization. To his supporters, these tariffs represented a return to fairness, a way to level the playing field for American industries. Stellantis, however, argued that the world had changed. EV production required complex supply chains spanning multiple continents. They claimed that adhering to America First policies would not only hurt their bottom line, but also stifle innovation. This ideological clash wasn't confined to boardrooms or political rallies. It played out in the lives of workers who found themselves caught in the crossfire. Factory closures meant fewer paychecks, but tariffs risked driving up consumer costs, creating a lose-lose situation for many families. As the debate raged, both sides faced criticism. Trump's tariffs were seen as overly simplistic, ignoring the complexities of modern manufacturing. Stellantis, meanwhile, was accused of abandoning their roots and prioritizing shareholders over stakeholders. This wasn't just a fight between a company and a politician, it was a referendum on the future of globalization and its impact on everyday lives. The stakes couldn't be higher, and as the narrative unfolded, it became clear that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. Stellantis defends its decision. In the face of mounting criticism, Stellantis refused to back down. Their message was clear. This wasn't about betrayal, it was about survival. As the backlash grew, Stellantis doubled down on their strategy, releasing a detailed statement defending their decision. They argued that the global automotive market had reached a crossroads, with electrification, automation, and competition driving unprecedented change. For Stellantis, adaptation wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. The company pointed to its recent expansion into regions like Egypt and Mexico as strategic moves aimed at securing long-term growth. Producing vehicles like the Jeep Grand Cherokee L in Egypt wasn't just about cutting costs, it was about accessing new markets and diversifying their global footprint. Stellantis claimed that by decentralizing production, they were positioning themselves as a resilient global player capable of withstanding economic shocks. Critics, however, were quick to push back. Labor unions accused Stellantis of using the language of innovation to justify cost-cutting measures that hurt workers. They argued that the company's actions were less about long-term strategy and more about short-term profits. For Trump supporters, this narrative fit neatly into their broader critique of globalization. At rallies, Trump called Stellantis' moves a betrayal of American workers, urging his followers to boycott the company. His message resonated deeply with those who felt left behind by decades of economic change. Stellantis' bold defense only deepened the divide, turning the spotlight onto the broader implications of their actions for the global auto industry. As Stellantis fought to justify its strategy, the pressure on workers and local economies became impossible to ignore. The human cost of globalization. And behind every corporate decision lies a human story. For the workers at Stellantis plants, the consequences were devastating. In communities like Warren, Michigan, where Stellantis had laid off thousands of workers, the human cost of globalization was impossible to overlook. For families who relied on steady paychecks from the Warren Truck Assembly plant, the sudden layoffs were catastrophic. Many of these workers had dedicated decades to their jobs, building a sense of identity and purpose around their roles at Stellantis. The layoffs didn't just strip them of their income, it stripped them of their stability. Parents worried about affording their children's education, and retirees feared they'd have to dip into savings meant for their golden years. The ripple effects extended beyond individual households. Local businesses that thrived on the patronage of Stellantis workers faced sharp declines in revenue. Diners once bustling with lunchtime crowds now sat empty. Schools struggled with shrinking budgets as families moved away in search of new opportunities. The social fabric of these communities began to fray, leaving a sense of collective loss. For those still employed, the uncertainty was equally painful. Workers at the Toledo Assembly Complex lived in constant fear of being the next to lose their jobs. Even as they clocked in each day, the looming threat of temporary production halts cast a shadow over every shift. The human toll of Stellantis' decisions underscored the broader stakes of this conflict, bringing the costs of globalization into sharp focus. As workers grappled with their new reality, Trump's promise of a different future became a beacon of hope for many. Trump's plan to fight back. In the face of Stellantis' global ambitions, Trump unveiled a plan that was as bold as it was controversial. At a rally in Michigan, Trump outlined his vision for reviving American industry. His plan centered on tariffs, steep ones designed to penalize companies like Stellantis for outsourcing jobs. Trump argued that these tariffs would level the playing field, forcing automakers to reconsider their global strategies and prioritize American workers. Critics were quick to point out the potential downsides. Economists warned that tariffs could lead to trade wars, driving up costs for consumers and creating supply chain disruptions. For automakers, the added expense of doing business could be passed down to buyers, making cars more expensive across the board. But Trump's supporters saw things differently. For them, this wasn't just about economics, it was about values. Tariffs represented a stand against what they perceived as corporate greed and a push to restore fairness to the system. Trump also pledged to revisit trade agreements like the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, arguing that they didn't do enough to protect American jobs. His vision for the future included renegotiating deals to prioritize domestic production, even if it meant ruffling feathers abroad. Trump's bold plan injected new energy into the debate, raising the stakes for Stellantis and other automakers navigating this volatile landscape. But as Trump's rhetoric intensified, Stellantis was already preparing for the challenges ahead, determined to maintain its course. Stellantis prepares for a fight. As Trump turned up the heat, Stellantis wasn't about to back down. The company braced itself for what promised to be a turbulent road ahead. Stellantis began implementing contingency plans to weather the storm. Executives knew that Trump's tariffs could disrupt their supply chains and cut into profits, but they believed their global strategy would ultimately prevail. One of Stellantis' key moves was diversifying its supplier network. Drawing on lessons learned during the pandemic, the company explored partnerships with suppliers outside of tariff-prone regions. This adaptability became a cornerstone of their approach, allowing them to mitigate risks and keep production running smoothly. The automaker also ramped up efforts to win over consumers with its upcoming lineup of electric and hybrid vehicles. Models like the Ram EV and the Jeep Grand Cherokee PHEV were positioned as game changers, blending cutting-edge technology with practical features. Stellantis hoped these innovations would distract from the controversy and solidify its reputation as a forward-thinking brand. But the challenges weren't just external. Internally, Stellantis faced growing dissent from its workforce. Union leaders criticized the company for prioritizing global expansion over local stability, while employees demanded greater transparency about their future. In response, Stellantis launched a public relations campaign aimed at rebuilding trust. They highlighted their investments in sustainable manufacturing and new technologies, painting a picture of a company committed to progress. While Stellantis' preparations showcased its resilience, the path forward was anything but certain. The battle with Trump was far from over, and the stakes continued to climb. As the tension between corporate ambition and political pressure reached a boiling point, the focus turned to the broader implications for the industry and beyond. The clash of ideologies. Stellantis versus Trump isn't just a business dispute, it's a battle of ideologies with massive stakes for the future of America. On one side of the conflict stands Stellantis, a multinational corporation advocating for globalization and innovation. For Stellantis, the world is a single marketplace, and success lies in adapting to its ever-changing dynamics. Moving production to places like Egypt and Mexico is framed as a necessary evolution in an industry defined by razor-thin margins and fierce competition. On the other side is Trump, championing a vision of economic nationalism that prioritizes American workers and industries above all else. His America First rhetoric strikes a chord with those who feel left behind by globalization, painting companies like Stellantis as villains in a narrative of betrayal. This ideological clash touches on deeper questions about the role of corporations in society. Should businesses prioritize profit and shareholder value, or do they have a responsibility to the communities they operate in? Trump's supporters argue that by outsourcing jobs, companies like Stellantis abandon the very people who built their brands. For Stellantis, the argument is more pragmatic. They insist that globalization enables them to remain competitive, invest in new technologies, and ultimately deliver better products to consumers. They warn that turning away from global markets risks stagnation, higher costs, and declining innovation. This battle of ideologies isn't just shaping the future of Stellantis, it's a microcosm of the broader economic debates that will define the 21st century. While these high-level debates rage on, the impact on local communities and everyday consumers is becoming increasingly evident. The economic ripple effect. Every decision made in a corporate boardroom sends shockwaves through the economy, and Stellantis' moves are no exception. The layoffs at Stellantis plants have already sent ripples through local economies, but the potential fallout from Trump's proposed tariffs could magnify those effects tenfold. For small businesses and factory towns, fewer workers mean fewer customers. Local diners, hardware stores, and daycare centers are already feeling the pinch, with some barely holding on. Then there's the impact on consumers. If tariffs are imposed on automakers importing cars or parts, prices could rise across the board. Even American-made vehicles rely on global supply chains, with parts sourced from countries like Mexico and China. A single tariff could make everything from brake pads to windshields more expensive, driving up the cost of repairs and new cars alike. The real estate market in these communities is also under strain. With fewer stable jobs, fewer families can afford to buy homes. Property values decline, municipal tax revenues shrink, and local governments struggle to fund schools and public services. The economic ripple effect doesn't stop at factory gates. It seeps into every corner of affected towns. These cascading consequences highlight the interconnected nature of modern economies, where a single policy can upend entire communities. Amid the economic uncertainty, Stellantis is betting big on a bold strategy to reshape its image and future. Stellantis' gamble on electrification. In the midst of controversy, Stellantis is staking its future on one word: electrification. With the auto industry at a turning point, Stellantis is leaning heavily into electric vehicles as a path forward. The company's recent announcements about all-electric models like the Ram EV and Jeep Grand Cherokee PHEV signal a clear commitment to innovation. Stellantis is betting that these vehicles will redefine their brand, attracting environmentally conscious consumers and future-proofing their business. But the stakes are high. The EV market is becoming increasingly competitive, with rivals like Tesla, Ford, and General Motors already dominating headlines. To stand out, Stellantis needs more than just new models. They need a narrative. They're positioning their EVs as the perfect blend of sustainability and practicality, targeting consumers who want to go green without compromising on features like towing capacity or range. Challenges remain. The potential loss of the $7,500 EV tax credit looms large. Without this incentive, the affordability of Stellantis' electric offerings could take a hit, making it harder to compete. The company is lobbying hard to retain the credit, but the outcome remains uncertain. If Stellantis' gamble pays off, it could mark a turning point for the company, proving that innovation and profitability can go hand in hand. While Stellantis focuses on the future, Trump's relentless pressure is forcing the industry to confront uncomfortable truths about its past and present. Trump's challenge to the industry. Trump's fiery rhetoric isn't just targeting Stellantis, it's a wake-up call for the entire automotive industry. Trump's critique of automakers outsourcing jobs isn't new, but his recent focus on Stellantis has brought renewed scrutiny to industry practices. His proposed tariffs and renegotiation of trade deals are intended to force companies to prioritize domestic production, but the feasibility of this approach is hotly debated. One of the key challenges is the complexity of modern supply chains. Automakers rely on a global network of suppliers to keep costs down and ensure steady production. Moving everything back to the United States isn't just expensive, it's logistically daunting. Trump's plans also raise questions about consumer impact. While his tariffs aim to protect American jobs, they could lead to higher prices for buyers, potentially shrinking the market. Critics argue that the strategy might hurt the very people it's meant to help by making cars less affordable for working families. Still, Trump's supporters believe his tough stance is necessary. They see his tariffs as a tool to hold corporations accountable and bring jobs back to America. For them, the short-term pain of higher prices is worth the long-term gain of revitalized communities and industries. Trump's challenge has forced the auto industry to reckon with its priorities, setting the stage for a showdown that could reshape the future of manufacturing. As this battle escalates, all eyes are on Stellantis' next moves and the broader implications for the economy. Stellantis' strategic pivot. Stellantis isn't just reacting to Trump's pressure, they're reshaping their strategy for the future. Facing mounting scrutiny and global challenges, Stellantis is charting a new course. The company's leadership has hinted at bold moves to reclaim their position in the market, focusing on two core areas: cost efficiency and innovation. To address cost concerns, Stellantis is exploring ways to streamline production without sacrificing quality. This includes rethinking their supply chain, negotiating with global suppliers, and adopting advanced manufacturing technologies like automation. These changes aim to reduce overhead while maintaining their competitive edge. On the innovation front, Stellantis is doubling down on electrification. Beyond their upcoming EV models, the company is investing heavily in battery technology, aiming to create longer-lasting and more affordable options. They're also developing advanced driver assistance systems to rival industry leaders, hoping to attract tech-savvy consumers. However, these efforts come with significant risks. Moving too quickly could alienate traditional customers, while failing to deliver on promises could damage their credibility. Stellantis is walking a fine line, balancing short-term survival with long-term growth. Their strategic pivot isn't just about survival, it's a bold attempt to redefine what it means to be a global automaker. While Stellantis looks inward, the broader industry is bracing for a seismic shift driven by changing consumer expectations and political pressures. The industry's growing pains. The battle between globalization and nationalism is shaking the auto industry to its core. The automotive sector has always been a barometer for economic and political trends, and the current turmoil is no exception. Companies are grappling with a rapidly changing landscape where consumer demand, environmental concerns, and geopolitical tensions intersect. Consumers are demanding more sustainable options, pushing automakers to innovate at an unprecedented pace. At the same time, political figures like Trump are challenging the industry to prioritize domestic production, forcing companies to reconsider their global strategies. For Stellantis and others, the stakes couldn't be higher. The rise of electric vehicles, the push for autonomous driving, and the demand for affordability are reshaping the market. Companies that fail to adapt risk being left behind, while those that embrace change have the potential to lead a new era of mobility. Yet the path forward is anything but clear. Supply chain disruptions, fluctuating tariffs, and shifting trade policies add layers of complexity. Automakers must navigate these challenges while staying true to their brand identities and delivering value to consumers. The industry's growing pains are a sign of transformation, setting the stage for a future that's both uncertain and full of potential. As the dust settles, the focus shifts to what this means for workers, consumers, and the communities that rely on the auto industry. The human cost of change. Behind every factory closure and corporate decision are the lives of thousands of workers and their families. The human impact of Stellantis' moves and the broader industry changes cannot be overstated. Layoffs ripple through communities, affecting not just those who lose their jobs, but also local businesses, schools, and social services. For families, the uncertainty is a constant source of stress, disrupting plans and dreams. The political discourse surrounding these changes often overlooks this human element. While debates rage about tariffs and trade policies, the workers at the heart of these issues are left wondering about their futures. Will new policies create more jobs, or will they simply shift the burden to consumers? Unions like the United Auto Workers are fighting to protect their members, but even they face challenges in a rapidly changing industry. Striking a balance between advocating for workers and collaborating with automakers on innovative solutions is no small feat. These stories serve as a reminder that every economic shift carries a deeply personal cost, highlighting the need for compassionate and forward-thinking solutions. As the industry transforms, the question remains, who will lead the charge into the future and at what cost? The road ahead. The future of Stellantis and the entire auto industry is being written right now. As Stellantis grapples with Trump's tariffs, global competition, and shifting consumer expectations, the company faces a pivotal moment. Their decisions over the next few years will shape not just their future, but also the broader industry. Will Stellantis succeed in its ambitious pivot, or will the pressures prove too great? The answer depends on their ability to innovate, adapt, and rebuild trust with workers and consumers. Similarly, the industry as a whole must navigate a delicate balance between global efficiency and local loyalty. Trump's continued influence on trade policies adds another layer of uncertainty. His push for tariffs could force automakers to rethink their entire production strategies, leading to a new era of American manufacturing, or a significant backlash from consumers and businesses alike. For consumers, the stakes are also high. Rising costs, changing technologies, and new policies will affect everything from how cars are made to how much they cost. Staying informed and engaged will be key to navigating these changes. The road ahead is full of challenges, but it's also ripe with opportunities for innovation, growth, and a reimagined future. The battle between Stellantis and Trump is far from over, and its implications will shape the auto industry for years to come. What do you think? Will Stellantis' strategy pay off, or is Trump right to hold automakers accountable? Let us know in the comments below.